There's no ethics anymore, so just do what we want. But in the case of, what you talked about the other day regarding wage theft, and I know you've mentioned it a lot, I'm very much of the mind that there is wage theft and that there is a certain amount of the pie that doesn't get shared properly. And whether that's because union strength, because of its interior, it's interior corruption. There's no question that exists, especially when unions do not allow for rank and file decision making, or because we do have a broken labor system in this country that basically bends the knee to Wall Street and Silicon Valley. We have this huge gap, if you will, that exists now. So we're going to play a very quick clip, but just a basic overview idea of exactly where we're coming from when it comes to the idea of wage theft. So here we go, guys.
For Black workers, more so than others, loss of income is frequently tied to racial discrimination.
This network of worker centers is supporting motions introduced by LA Council members Hugo Soto Martinez and Tim McCosker. One would give the city more power to enforce labor laws.
On a yearly basis, working Angelenos lose about $1.4 billion a year, which is an average about $27 million a week. We know that this disproportionately affects women, people of color, and some of the most working poor of our city. And so when we're talking about the issues that we're facing in our city of homelessness, of poverty, of evictions that are happening across the city, this is truly, in my opinion, the difference between someone staying in their home or not, being able to take their family out to eat or not, or even having some of the simple luxuries of the city.
I am in not any way, shape, or form defending what happened in Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago. I think that YouTube streamer got exactly what she had coming to her. And as far as I'm concerned,
can you recap that to me? Because I'm not sure I'm knowing what you're talking about.
Sean, please.
Oh, he's talking about the Philadelphia riots. The after the Eddie Irizarry guy, the cop that shot Eddie Irizarry, there was a protest. And then after the protest, people came out, including I believe she's most famous on TikTok, but she was streaming on Instagram and filmed themselves going from place to place. And her nickname is Meatball, which is
But she was filming herself at protest?
No, she was filming herself at the riots, receiving stolen property. She basically filmed herself committing 6 felonies, which they charged her.
Has she been arrested?
She was arrested, and she's out on bail now.
Okay.
But the problem, of course, is that her attorney, and you even pointed this out, that your defense attorney obviously has to do what they have to do in order to get you obviously get the charges dropped or
That's
at least
their job.
reduced. The past, of course, but the fact that they decided to play the race card in this instant, it was just so out of context and so inappropriate. And what that ends up doing is it invalidates other people who are dealing with the actual ramifications of racial policies that still exist. Obviously, not to the degree that they once did, but there are people that are hurt by people like that who basically decide to do that type of thing.
Wait, are you going to draw the link between the Philadelphia thing and what we just watched, which was an LA thing? Are somebody going to explain some of that?
But the whole idea is that, Sean, you have mentioned that you don't think that wage theft is necessarily a thing. I don't agree.
That's not my position. My issue is whenever we're talking about the issue of people looting these stores or people, sometimes it's organized retail theft or whatever. I talk a lot about the 327 people that are arrested 6,000 times, which represent a third of all shoplifting arrests in New York City, and how we just keep releasing these people and then they go out and do it again. Somebody, and it happens on Sam Cedar's show. I recently criticized Brianna Joy Gray for this. Will say, oh, but wage theft is more. But that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. It's like a deflection. It's basically problem B. I bring up a problem and then you bring up another problem. What about this? Yeah, and it has nothing to do with anything. I didn't say that.
You're talking about those sort of mob thefts that I've seen, these actions where groups of people. And the problem is you're saying they're not getting strict enough penalties to where it's really doing anything to solve the problem.
And by the way, in LA, they one of the things I mentioned when I was talking with Sam Cedar is that a lot of this happens to illegal immigrants, and they're here, they don't have paperwork and all of that, but you're still supposed to pay them, especially if they're working on federally funded jobs, the Davis-Bacon wage, and they don't do that. They don't pay them that. And I think that's number 2 is construction, but number 1 is tips. like people stealing tips from their servers or wherever you're getting tips from.
Sure.
Which is one of the reasons why I recommend paying tips in cash if you can, if you remember to bring cash to the restaurant or wherever. But
I
yeah, I'm not,
usually do because I was a waitress for like that was my former job. So
Waiter, bartender.
yeah. So I generally do, but yeah, it's what does that have to do with
yeah,
wage
I'm not saying it doesn't exist. If I haven't made that clear in my videos, I'm just saying that it's brought up as a distraction from what we were talking. Whenever retail theft is brought up, it's brought up as a distraction. Like
wage that like somebody says, oh, what about
Yeah.
can't both things be true?
Yes, for sure. And then I remember specifically Sam was trying to claim that it's the same places that are being stolen from that are doing the wage theft. That turned out to not be the case.
That
They're
doesn't
actually
seem right.
retail is 5th on the list, I believe, which still is high for like
Yeah.
stealing from your employees. And this is like, you like I remember there was a documentary about Walmart, but like Walmart employees will tell you this, that they'll work 42 hours and instead of getting the time and a half for the 2 hours, that will be added as regular time on their next paycheck, right? That's technically the wage theft. It's illegal. It should be prosecuted.
Right.
But my point is like if I'm talking about retail theft
Right.
or like shoplifting, like I want to like I'm sick of that as a distraction.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and Sam would have a much better point if, like, let's say hypothetically, we could trace that a certain sect of people that have been violated repeatedly by their employer were the same set of people that were breaking into that specific place and ripping them off. Still illegal. I still don't condone it, but I'd at least be like, So, but I don't think that's the case.
Also, my second criticism, and you'll see this often, is that they'll cite a chart from 2013 on wage theft versus shoplifting, right? Now, wage theft probably today, like I haven't looked at the recent chart recently. I'm assuming it's more than shoplifting even today. Even if you take the National Retail Federation numbers, which they're doing a survey, and granted, like surveys can be useful, but it's the National Retail Federation. So like you take them with a grain of salt, and they're also measuring shrink, and then they break down the percentages in there. So people take the big number. But people use a 2013 chart because the disparity is greater in 2013. Like there's no reason to not use the updated numbers. And I believe I looked this up, and I still think that the wage theft was higher for sure. Like, but it was narrow. The gap was narrower, which is why people don't want to use it, because it looks better with the big ass gap. Like it's just a fact. So like that's the other criticism, but I never said this doesn't happen. Of course it happens. And I believe even that 50 billion number from 2015 was actually the amount they recovered like in that year. So like it happened so often they were able to recover $50 billion. So it definitely happens a lot.
Right. You're aware that it happens.
Yeah.
So Peter, you caught him out of context, or he was taken out of context. But
hey,
so let me ask you, Sean,
I'm not here to but I'm not here to sandbag Sean.
No, we don't do that. Sean knows that. We're not doing that. So let me ask you.
I was just going to say, but that's something that a lot of shows do. They're just looking for clicks. That's not what
I don't want that. I won't debate. I'm not debating. I don't even want. I just want to talk to people. So what is in your mind, like what could be being done better, or what should these places be doing better that are seeing these spikes in this? And is it in certain areas? I mean, I know I've seen this happening. Like I know this is a real thing that's happening. But what's the solution? Like, what do you think needs to be done?
So like when you have 327 people representing a third of all arrests, like you have to hold these people. Like you can't offend 25 times and then just keep getting released. It's so comical in New York, because in New York we have this we have bail reform, which again, like I can understand arguments for reducing or even removing the cash bail penalties, but the judges in New York are also not allowed to assess dangerousness. It makes them unique in this whole country, or your propensity to reoffend. They can only assess flight risk. And they used to use bail as a substitute for like dangerousness by putting a bail amount on. And like it's an unworkable system. Like you have these stories. And again, it's literally an anecdote. We're literally talking about 300 people where these people will be released the same day from the station. Then they'll steal from another store, be arrested again, and then release, and then steal from another store on their way home. It's absurd. So I just want judges to be able to hold these people that are repeat offenders. I'm not saying if you're a kid and you take a candy bar, we throw you in jail. But you know what? Like you have to, if you break the law like 5 times and you're arrested for it 5 times, then eventually we have to do something a little more than release you automatically from the station or a night in jail. Like, we need some kind of deterrent, and you have to prosecute these people seriously. Again, this isn't, if you just got rid of these people and like they're being arrested 6,000 times, there's plenty of times they're not getting caught. Then
And by these people, let's clarify that you're talking about a certain group of people that committed an act of crime. Okay.
The 327 people that are repeat stealing from these stores. So like,
right.
And there's situations like this, and I pull up this chart from John Jay College of Criminal Justice that just shows like theft, like just all kinds of theft, petite larceny, right? Which is what this is. And it has the different categories, and every category is pretty much level, maybe a little spike here or there, but like people aren't mugging, people aren't doing any of this other stuff. But you look at the petite larceny inside a major store, and it's up 77% in 2 years. So it's like a line that just goes up dramatically.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people say it's economic hardship, but go look at that chart, goes all the way back to 2006. Go look at 2008 and 2009, during the impacts of the Great Recession. It barely spiked at all. It spiked like 2%. So it's, to me, this is like an asinine policy that we have, and we can actually see the theft spike when it's implemented.
What
right.
would be?
So this is a New York problem specifically right now, what you're talking about, but it's a statewide, right? Like it's a state thing where
it's a major city. Yeah, it's definitely a major city problem. There's no question about it.
Well, it's not every major city. It's specific cities where they're not prosecuting these people, and that's the thing. When you don't do that.
I wonder if it has, and this is my cynicism here. This is where I get cynical, not just skeptical, because I kind of feel like I know things. But it's like this whole concept of arrest, release, like that whole cycle is extremely profitable. And something that I have learned is that when municipalities and criminal structures keep people in the system for long term, like in that way, it's very profitable. So I'm just wondering, because it's almost like they're recouping the money from the retail theft in their judicial costs, which these people will end up having to like pay probably and be on probation for eternity. And it's revenue stuff. Like,
but they're not really paying the costs. They're just being released. And it's like different in terms of like different areas. So Los Angeles doesn't have, not Los Angeles, like California as a state doesn't have the statewide bail reform law that New York has, right? They try to pass something, but it's different. But the problem that they have is that they passed a law, and I forget the name of it, where you can't go to a state penitentiary unless you commit something that they put in the violent crime category. So you have to end up going to the county jail. But the problem is the county jail gets overflowed, so people are being released from the county jail because they're like, if you, and by the way, they put some violent crimes in the non-violent category, which is absurd in my mind. But if you end up having like people who are like, let's say a domestic abuser or a shoplifter, and you're running a jail, you're like, well, I want to hold the domestic abuser for a little longer because this guy is committing physical violence, right?
Yeah.
And these shoplifters only sometimes commit physical violence. So like, so you end up releasing them. So it's like a similar situation. And then you see all these store closures and all these problems in like communities. And I can't stand I can't stand the fact that like nobody's solving these problems. And worse, people will protest when the stores close, but like not always, they're not always directing their ire at the politicians who made it like extremely unprofitable to be there.
Right.
That makes sense. But I also was curious as, your perspective, well, what would help mitigate a lot of these crime issues? I mean, from a populist left perspective, I have from the very beginning, one of the policies that Bernie was a big advocate for was tuition-free public college. I personally believe that the key is to have tuition-free trade schools, that people need to be able to learn a skill and not have to go into debt in order to do that. And the same is true if you want to go to public school. I'm even open to the idea that if you're going to get tuition-free college offered to you, that it has to be in an in-demand area of study, that you absolutely, like, we need certain types of employees in the workforce. If it's civil engineering, for example, like, to me, that would be an example of, okay, well, I'm willing to become a civil engineer. Can I get tuition-free public college as a result? And I want to become a welder. I want to become a mason. I want to become a plumber, whatever the case is. Like, to me, teaching people a trade and being able to work off of that, or a skill set that is necessary, I think we'd have a heck of a lot less issues regarding, these types of situations where you see people working in low wage jobs that are not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm gonna totally disagree, like, that this is connected to the issue that we're seeing, because what we're seeing is opportunistic behavior. Right now, we've like lowered the consequences for committing this crime, and this has allowed organized crime to come in here because there's like no consequences for participating in this. So you have people. I did a profile on a guy in Portland that was arrested. He eventually stole enough that they ended up giving him a real sentence, and he did an interview. And he was like, I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars on this stolen merchandise. And they asked him, did you worry about a security guard? And he's like, no. He's like, the security guards in Portland, they don't stop you. Like, they stand there. They're basically a scarecrow. Like, they're supposed to deter you by that, but they can't really intervene because it's more of a liability issue for the store. And this is something that Nike complained about because they contracted there's like a historic Nike store that was opened up. Black civil rights leaders asked them to come in this neighborhood, and it became like such a success. They moved it to a bigger store. So these people end up going to the store and they're stealing from it constantly. And they asked to have off-duty officers work there so that they could have arrest power. The mayor said no. That store closed. It opened up in the 80s. We had way higher crime overall in the 80s.
Yes.
They were able to function as a business while also promising to donate a portion of the profits from that area to the community, because that was the deal that they struck with these like civil rights leaders. So they're able to operate perfectly fine up until recently, when they stopped prosecuting these retail thieves. And like, they tell you exactly what they're doing. So you have to have a disincentive. The idea that like they're going to go and get like a trade when like they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars doing this. And I understand not all of them are making this. Some of them are also drug addicts. Like, so, there is an issue with addiction that you do have to address. I'm fine like talking about that. But the fact is, it's like, it's an opportunity. And by the way, a lot of these people who are doing this are also minors. So they're like, not, they're doing it for fun. Like they're doing it to make money. Now, granted, like, I know people are going to say they're in poverty, but like, this isn't like there's poor people that are working in those stores that are not making a good living and all that. And they're just stealing way more stuff from them.
I actually I agree with you. I think here's the thing. I know that, let's say in a typical, and this is specifically true for women's prisons, that more than 90% of the people that are in there are there for crimes of poverty. And by crimes of poverty, it could be anything from drugs, prostitution, bad checks, whatever. These are not scary, violent people, right? It's crimes of poverty. And those are not the same kind of people that I'm envisioning in what you're talking about. It's almost like these are people that are doing it for sport. They're doing it for some sort of showmanship. They're obviously getting off on it. It's like this sort of like flash mob theft thing. And that to me is not the same as like the people that I know who have been desperate and have done things to just be getting by. This sounds different. The people that are organizing these things are not necessarily the same people that are doing crimes of poverty. These are people that are using those people most likely to facilitate.
This is where I feel like I'm somehow like almost more on the left than even you guys, because it's like, I don't think anything about being in poverty makes you have inferior moral character that you're going to go out and steal. And like,
no, not at all.
We often see that this is like, oh, out of desperation and all of that. But one of the things I try to highlight, and like, by the way, I forgot what author labels this, that is that a lot of people adopt luxury beliefs because they don't have to deal with the consequences of their beliefs. And I feel like this is one of them, that these people are in poverty, therefore they steal. And one of the things I really try to focus on when I'm covering these stories is like, I did one out of the Targets that are closing. And there's a Target closing in Harlem where this woman works she's been working at the Target since it opened in 2010. She doesn't make a lot of money. She was like in tears screaming at the news person, and she's like, I scream at these people that they're ruining the entire neighborhood because this is like an anchor store in this mall, like it's like a mall strip in Harlem, and like that's going to affect all these businesses out there. So like the people who are struggling, like they're working at these places, they're losing their jobs. Target says they'll transfer them to like these other stores, but let's be honest, Target doesn't have extra slots at their other stores that they could just put these people to, that they're just going to stand around. Like once the store closed, they're going to eventually lose employees, and it damages the neighborhood. And it's just, to me, it's like there's nothing that says you have to steal if you're poor. And like
no, and I by no means think that is anything having to do with that. What I'm saying is, though, and this is something I've realized as a mother, is that there's nothing you won't do to feed your kids. And that's why it's very specifically haunting to me about women that are incarcerated, that I know, what because I got to tell you, there's nothing I wouldn't do. So I do by no means think that people that are poor have less morality whatsoever. But I just think that there's this universal thing where some people, you're going to take care of your kids one way or another. And I do not think that the majority of the people that are doing these flash mob things are in that category.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.